Hello readers! Today I'm in the middle of this social studies textbook to teach you about text features. Not just the words as they're written, but other things going on the screen, like this old chart here, or this image, or these bolded words. Because something that's awfully useful when you are reading informational texts, like a textbook, like a newspaper article, is trying to figure out what sort of knowledge can be taken from things that aren't just text in paragraphs, right? It's part of the layout of the page, the design of it, or by the text itself, like the way the text looks. We'll go through a little bit of that right now. So, for example, in this first opening paragraph, I'm looking at the gift of the Nile. You can see that the letters of the words are kind of thin and slanted. This is called an italic typeface. And the way it's being used in this textbook section is it's kind of like the text is whispering to you. I'll show you what I mean. Because it's the way that it works in this particular paragraph is it's telling you, hey, this is what this section's about, right? In this unit, you will debate whether the pharaoh's actions created enough order and stability, and those two words look special, and I'll get to that in a second, to justify their power. The geography of ancient Egypt had a lot to do with how the pharaohs ran ancient Egypt and why they ruled the way they did. Here you will read some information about Egypt's geography and discuss your ideas with your classmates in preparation for the big debate ahead. So, it's in italics, it's kind of this like thin, slanted text. By the way that the words look, it's trying to signal to you, okay, this isn't the same as like instructional text. This is more trying to communicate to you, here's what you can expect to learn in this section. There are many different ways to use italics, but it's always for some kind of emphasis. These words look different because the author wants you to pay attention to them in a different way. Now let's look at what's going on with the words order and stability. You notice that in addition to being italicized, in addition to being slanted like that, they're also thicker than regular text. And we can see this actually throughout the page, like the word oppressive down here. You see my cursor, or the word valued up here. When you make letters thicker and more obvious looking on the page, that's called a bold typeface. And the reason that you would make something bold is to say, okay, valued is one of our vocabulary words. We'll be thinking about that word, or it's an important concept. Just like oppressive is another important vocabulary word for this lesson. We can see these up at the very top of the page. Order, proposal, value, oppressive, revolution, stability. These are the vocabulary words that the authors want you to take away from reading this textbook section. So now that we're on this page, we've got this map here of northeastern Africa and the Nile River and its delta and the lakes that contribute to it. It can be useful to look at things like maps or charts or tables even before you start reading the text, just to get a better impression of what the text is going to be about. We can see from this map that rain falls in the south, here where there's this big old lake, and the water of the Nile flows north. There's a lot going on in this map too, so we've got a lot of little charts and numbers ringing this map. We also have this like projection here, so here's a map of Africa and the Arabian Peninsula and Europe, and we can see that this little orange rectangle is a projection. It's zooming in on that little chunk of Northeast Africa. Now you can see here in red the outlines of present-day countries. But since this is about ancient Egypt, it's not super important that we be thinking about the present-day countries in Northeast Africa. We're talking about something 5,000 years ago. And I think that's why the modern borders of these countries are shown as dotted lines rather than big, thick black lines with the legend saying Egypt, Sudan, Eritrea, it's important, but it's not immediately important to what's being discussed. Because we're talking about the Nile, a river which cuts through a bunch of countries. And we're really talking about how the Nile behaves rather than how all of these countries interact in the present. Let's go back to the beginning of this section so I can show you this chart. So this is a chart that illustrates the point of this paragraph. So the heading of this paragraph is a long-lasting civilization. And to illustrate it, we have this chart that is called Ancient Egypt. And we have on the right a series of years, and on the left a series of, let's call them period names. The early period, Old Kingdom, First Intermediate Period, the Middle Kingdom, etc., etc. And these go from 2950 BCE to 332 BCE. So the most recent, and BCE stands for before the Common Era, so before year 0. That means that if we go all the way back to the early period, we are traveling back in time 5,000 years. That's what I'm getting from this column, is that was a really long civilization. And let's take a look at what the passage says. Ancient Egypt is one of the world's most important and valued ancient civilizations. There's valued, bolded word that the text wants you to learn. Founded over 5,000 years ago, good math me, the civilization lasted for almost 3,000 years. Hey! Historians have broken ancient Egypt into periods of time that represent changes in boundaries, leaders, and some elements of culture. Yet for most of this time period, 2950 to 322 BCE, before the Common Era, certain characteristics like government, language, and religion remained nearly the same. The thing to know about ancient Egypt is that it lasted for a long, long time, about 10 times the entire history of the United States. So why include this chart on the textbook page? What do we get from that? And I think what we get from that is a sense of scale. You look at those numbers and you imagine just how many lifetimes fit inside 3,000 years. All the changes that can come about, even in a couple of years. Imagine 3,000 years of history. And also on this page there is an image. There is a picture of the Nile, right? That's what this caption says, an aerial view of the Nile. According to the passage, the deserts on either side of the Nile were good for keeping enemies away. And we can see that there's these like bleached desert areas surrounding this really fertile river valley. You can see how green it is compared to how just sandy and blasted the desert is. And this image really helps drive home for me this paragraph, which is all about the difference between the beautiful, fertile land near the Nile that was called the Black Land, and then the oppressive desert known as the Red Land. So these are just a couple of ways to think about the features of text, right? Like what's in the headings and the introductions, how is the text being formatted? Is it in italics, all sideways like this? Is it bolded, all deep black, like valued or oppressive? What's going on in the images? Do they have captions that illustrate points from the text for us? What's the point of these charts? What are they trying to inform us? So as you read informational or nonfiction texts, take a look at the images, take a look at the charts and the tables and the maps, and you will better be able to discover what the text is trying to tell you. You can learn anything. David out.